Another month has come to an end, and with it, so has the list of evil murderers sentenced for their heinous crimes. And so, in what has now become a monthly special for this channel, I have gone through and chosen 14 of the most brutal, shocking and downright despicable murders to showcase to you in this video, being careful to choose cases that were not always reported nationally, and so knowing that you will most probably not have heard of some, if not most, of these cases. From a gang of young men who murdered their victim in a Mexican cartel-style attack, to a mother who took her child's life in the most evil of ways, all to get back at her ex. These cases truly were the most shocking I came across, and they were all committed by murderers who were either sentenced or found guilty of the act in April 2025. Hello and welcome to the Diary of Madmen and Monsters, where we talk about the mad men, women and monsters that inhabit our society, covering well-known and not so well-known cases across the UK and beyond. And if you're the type of person who loves true crime but can take or leave people, you're in the right place and you're going to fit in well. Now, let's get ready because it's time for more true crime. And just before I crack on with the first case, due to the fact that I can only briefly touch on each case in this video, please rest assured that I will be covering some of these cases in full detail in future on the channel. So if there are any cases in particular or details that you would like me to follow up on in the future, then please do let me know in the comments. The first of our murdering madmen today is Paul Butler, who stabbed his estranged wife to death after making her life a living hell for 6 months, due to his refusal to accept that their relationship was over. On the afternoon of the 22nd of January 2025, after having been seen lurking outside of Claire's workplace earlier that day, Paul Butler had made his way to a shop and purchased a set of kitchen knives, throwing away 2 of the knives and keeping the biggest one for himself. Then, just before 9 p.m, Butler, intoxicated and carrying the large kitchen knife, approached Claire Chick, his estranged wife's home, wearing a camouflage jacket with his hood up. Claire, who had arranged to meet Paul Maxwell, her current boyfriend, came walking outside to do so, but was met with Butler walking calmly towards her, where he then grabbed her arm and began furiously stabbing her repeatedly. Over and over again, he stabbed her with demonic ferocity as she screamed for her life, hoping to attract the attention of someone who might stop this vile attack. However, Paul would continue undisturbed, stabbing Claire more than 23 times, and as he plunged the knife into Claire's body for the final time, he looked up and recognised Paul Maxwell, who had arrived just as Butler was finishing his horrendous assault. Upon recognising him, Butler then focused his attention on Maxwell, chasing him down and threatening to do the same to him, shouting, "I'll do you too!" Upon being unable to catch Mr. Maxwell, Paul made his escape from the scene and was later apprehended by police at a hotel in Linksard, where he expressed remorse for having committed such an atrocious crime. As emergency services attended to Claire, it was quickly found that her injuries were most likely unsurvivable, but the paramedics working on her tried in vain, transporting her to hospital, where she passed from her injuries an hour after the attack. During the investigation, police uncovered that Claire Chick, a university lecturer, and Paul Butler had recently been married before Claire had called off the relationship incredibly soon after the wedding, due to what was reported as Paul's increasingly controlling and abusive behaviour, with friends stating that Claire had admitted that she thought she had made a mistake. During their separation and in the months leading up to the murder, Paul's behaviour had become increasingly more unhinged, and Claire had reported him on 5 separate occasions for a myriad of offences, such as Paul's abusive messages and calls, turning up to her home and work, threatening her and her new boyfriend, and with him even going as far as placing a tracker on her car to follow her movements 24/7. With it even coming to light that Claire made her last police report the very night before her death that stated, "I honestly feel like Paul Butler will kill me if further action is not taken. I am constantly afraid of leaving the house. I am very fearful of what he has done and what he will do." Little did she know just how prophetic her words would be. Paul pleaded guilty to the murder of Claire Chick and on the 25th of April 2025 at Plymouth Crown Court was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 26 years and 277 days. Our next murderous monster is Alwin Thomas, an evil individual who, after a day of heavy drinking and drug taking, strangled his girlfriend to death and tried to cover it up by claiming it was a sex act gone wrong. On the afternoon of Monday, August 19th, 2024, Alwin Thomas and his girlfriend Victoria Thomas were out enjoying a day of socialising and visiting the pubs of the Birchgrove area in Cardiff, with CCTV showing them visiting the New Inn on Caerphilly Road and then Club 3000 Bingo in Gabalfa. After drinking 16 pints of lager and snorting a large amount of his mood was described as argumentative, with one witness stating he was not really himself and looked through me, and continued that whilst at the bingo said he was angry and hot-headed. CCTV, captured on the night in question, showed Alwin snorting a line of and then starting an argument with Victoria before they got into a taxi and headed home, arriving home at approximately 9:26 p.m. At just after 11 p.m. that night, Alwin's sister received a text message from him that read, "I'm sorry, I've done something really bad." And, due to the concerns raised by the texts, Alwin's niece then went to check on Victoria at the home of the pair and discovered Victoria's body in the early hours of Tuesday the 20th of August. When police arrived at the home, they found Alwin asleep in the couple's bedroom of the house after telling police he had taken an overdose, and immediately he denied murdering Victoria. However, during the investigation, he later admitted to strangling Victoria, but claimed it was during make-up sex after she had asked him to strangle her. The prosecution, however, would not accept this line of events and instead put forward an alternative proposal in line with evidence found during the investigation. It is believed that after an afternoon of drinking and drug taking and a somewhat anger-ridden taxi ride home, something had happened to make Victoria frightened of him, forcing her to go and sleep in the spare room, with Alwin then following Miss Thomas into the room, and on her son's bed he placed his hands around her neck and then strangled her to death in a fit of anger and rage. It is after this that he had then begun texting his sister in the manner that he did. During the trial at Cardiff Crown Court, Alwin stuck to his story that Victoria's death was simply a sex game gone wrong. But the jury saw through his deception, and on March 26th, the jury deliberated for just 4.5 hours, finding him guilty of the murder of Victoria Thomas, with Judge Tracy Lloyd Clark sentencing him on the 24th of April to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years. Our third and fourth murdering madmen are part of a gang of drug dealers who threw their lives away when they murdered a 26-year-old man called Anselm Senaj over a dispute surrounding drugs. Henchmen Mohammed Saqib Khan, 24, and Mohammed Samiul Miha, 19, alongside Ibrahim Naim, 18, and Zain Ali, 22, killed their victim in cold blood after giving chase in a stolen car in Newham, East London. On the night of Saturday, November 11th, 2023, at around 10:10, Anselm Senaj, a 26-year-old drug dealer, was travelling in the back of a taxi when he noticed that the taxi was being followed by a silver Mitsubishi. As he spoke with the driver regarding the car, he said, "There is one car behind. They will kill me." Suddenly, as the taxi passed by the junction of Victoria Avenue and Grangewood Street in Newham, East London, the silver Mitsubishi sped past and stopped just in front of the taxi he was travelling in. The taxi driver, confused and shocked by this sudden occurrence, slammed on the brakes of his car and stopped dead in the road. Immediately, 3 of the gang, consisting of Mohammed Saqib Khan, Mohammed Samiul Miha and Zain Ali, all wearing black masks and gloves, jumped from their car wielding knives and machetes, surrounding the taxi and beginning a rapid, sudden and direct assault on Mr. Sanaj, lasting just mere seconds, in which they punched, grabbed and slashed at the victim, who was still in his seat in the back of the taxi. Trying in vain to escape the blows, Mr. Sanaj attempted to avoid the knives, but due to the frenzied ferocity of the attack, he was unable to avoid the blows and was fatally stabbed by Mohammed Saqib Khan in the chest, before the gang of men then retreated, jumping back in the stolen vehicle and fleeing the scene, with Ibrahim Naim driving the stolen vehicle, and in doing so, leaving Ansalam Sanaj lying in the rear seat of the taxi, bleeding profusely from his injuries. Emergency services were on the scene quickly, but despite their best efforts, Mr. Sanaj died at the scene from the injuries inflicted upon him by this bloodthirsty and vicious group. Immediately, the police began their search for the men, finding the car, which had been stolen previously, burnt out the next day. Very quickly, Mia, Ali and Naim were apprehended and charged with the murder of Mr. Sanaj, but Mr. Saqib Khan, who had also been identified in the murder, had fled to Amsterdam after the attack, and after an international manhunt, he was arrested by Dutch authorities on the 4th of December 2023 and brought back to the UK on the 12th of January 2024 to face justice for his crime. Although the exact motive is not entirely clear, police believe that the attack had something to do with drugs, after information gleaned from mobile phones of the victim and the perpetrators. After a 14-week-long trial at the Old Bailey on Monday the 13th of January 2025, Mohammed Saqib Khan and Mohammed Samiul Miha were convicted of murder, and Ibrahim Naim and Zain Ali were found guilty of manslaughter in relation to the death of Ansalam Sanaj. And on the 11th of April 2025, Mohammed Saqib Khan was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 26 years, and Mohammed Samiul Miha was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years, both for the murder of Mr. Sanaj, with Ibrahim Naim sentenced to 10.5 years and Zain Ali sentenced to 14 years for the manslaughter of Mr. Sanaj. Our 5th and 6th callous killers on the list are David Walcott and Rammon Malley, who, acting in unison, stabbed a man to death in full view of the public and then drank pints of Guinness to celebrate in Croydon, South London. On Friday the 12th of April 2024, David Walcott and Rammon Malley set out armed with knives tucked into their waistbands in the planned pursuit of their victim, Ricard Safa, with the intention of hunting him down and attacking him when they found him. Heading to Fellmonger's yard in Croydon, the pair, alongside Jordan Vincent, whose whereabouts is as of yet unknown, stalked the area, searching for their prey with malicious intent. At just before 6 p.m, Ricard had just left a friend's flat near Fellmonger's yard and was on his way to meet his partner. As he did, he was spotted by the eagle-eyed trio, who then began a hot pursuit of their intended target, with Ricard realising that the threesome were after him and immediately fleeing the oncoming attack. As he ran through the Surrey Street Market, where stallholders were packing up for the day, he turned into an alleyway where the 3 men managed to catch up with him and, in a brutal and rapid attack, stabbed him 13 times in just 20 seconds. Upon fleeing the scene, the trio made their way to the Spread Eagle pub around the corner and purchased 3 pints of Guinness. At around 6:04 p.m, after having been asked to remove their hats under house rules, the threesome got up and left without finishing their drinks. Back at the scene of the murder, Mr. Safa was being aided by heroic passers-by who were doing all that they could to keep him alive. Soon after the incident, emergency services arrived on the scene and took over the care of Ricard, but despite their best efforts, he died at the scene, being pronounced dead at 6:28 p.m. Immediately, a manhunt was launched, and after scrolling through hundreds of hours of CCTV, the police had identified their 3 suspects: David Walcott, 35, Rammon Malley, 33, and Jordan Vincent, with police apprehending Walcott first, during which Walcott said, "This is madness. How am I getting nicked for murder, bro? You ain't even got the right person. I'm not a murderer, bro. I didn't kill nobody." Malley, however, left the country just 4 days after the killing, but was arrested upon his return at Gatwick Airport on the 5th of May. Throughout the trial, Walcott and Malley both admitted to being at the scene at the time of the murder, but denied being involved in the stabbing, trying to convince jurors that they were simply witnesses to the crime. However, the jury saw through their facade and, on the 26th of February 2025, the pair were found guilty of the murder of Ricard Safa, and on Thursday, 17th of April 2025, Judge Anuj Dear, KC, jailed the men for life with a minimum sentence of 27 years. Police are still at present on the lookout for Jordan Vincent, with a £10,000 reward being offered for any information that leads to his detainment and conviction. Our 7th murdering maiden on the list today is Morin Rickards, an abusive and evil madwoman who subjected her husband to a torrent of abuse and what seemed like a lifetime of suffering, documenting a lot of it on video camera before murdering him in cold blood and hiding his body from view. On the 28th of June 2024, Morin Rickards, a 50-year-old law student studying at Christchurch University, sent a harrowing text to her daughter regarding her father, prompting said daughter to call the police, who then went on to uncover an evil and hate-filled crime that would see her mother go to jail for life. Just weeks earlier, Morin Rickards had finally followed through on her promise to her husband, Jeremy Rickards, to whom she had been married for 27 years, when, in a violent and brutal attack on the 9th of June, she stabbed him to death in a loft room of their shared home, and then hid his body in the cupboard, fulfilling the promise she had repeatedly made to him during her torrents of abuse, in which she would threaten to one day murder him. Upon receiving the text, Morin's daughter, who was Jeremy's stepdaughter and was in Kenya at the time, was devastated because within the message, Morin had told her that her father had committed suicide whilst working in Saudi Arabia on the 9th of June. But, not trusting her mother, the daughter then contacted Saudi Arabian authorities, who informed her that her father had not visited the country at all, prompting her to phone the police and report her father missing. Kent police, who then opened up an investigation into Jeremy's whereabouts, immediately visited Morin at their home, and Morin tried to lie her way out of it, telling the police that Jeremy was indeed in Saudi Arabia and that her daughter had gotten it wrong. But after looking into the disappearance further, the police noticed that Morin had been using Jeremy's bank cards and, on the 11th of July, arrested her on suspicion of fraud. While in custody, police searched Morin's home and, after smelling a foul odour coming from various locations in the house and garden, discovered Jeremy's body, stuffed in a suitcase under a hedge in the back garden, and the full picture of the fate that had befallen Jeremy began to emerge. During the trial, at which Morin Rickards pleaded not guilty, it was found that she had been abusing Jeremy for years, recording some of the abuse on camera, which often showed her beating him and mocking him, calling him different names, including British boy. It was found that Jeremy had become weaker and more frail towards his death, with Morin becoming stronger than him because of this. But still, the abuse did not stop, with the last known use of Jeremy's phone coming on the 8th of June when he made a call to top up his credit, and Morin can be heard in the background of the call threatening to kill him. It is thought that Morin had then went on to murder Jeremy on the 9th of June, or shortly thereafter, attacking him in the loft room, stabbing him a total of 5 times, with 2 of the stab wounds penetrating his heart and killing him fast. After murdering her husband, Morin then placed his body in the cupboard, where she left him for some days, before going back to dismember his body and placed it in a suitcase that she then hid under a bush and lawn coverings at the back garden of the home. Morin then went on to concoct elaborate stories about Jeremy's whereabouts, telling his daughter that he had gone to work in Saudi Arabia and faking messages from his phone to pretend that he was still alive, and then telling people that he had taken his own life, which eventually raised suspicion and led to the police's involvement. On the 13th of March 2025 at Canterbury Crown Court, Morin was found guilty of Jeremy's murder, and on the 9th of April 2025 she was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 22 years. Our 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th and 13th murdering madmen on the list today are a particularly evil and despicable gang of monsters. Mahakdeep Singh, 24, and Sahejpal Singh, 26, ambushed a DPD driver in broad daylight alongside Arshdeep Singh, Jagdeep Singh, Shivdeep Singh and Manhot Singh, using a range of weapons including a golf club, axe, a cricket bat, a wooden stave, a hockey stick, a knife and a shovel to execute him in a cartel-style murder in the Cotton Hill area of Shrewsbury in August 2023. On the afternoon of the 21st of August 2023, Alwin Singh, a 23-year-old delivery driver, was making his rounds with his DPD work colleague when he turned into Berwick Avenue in Shrewsbury in search of his next address. Unbeknown to him, the gang of dastardly individuals were waiting upon his arrival after they had been tipped off about his route by one of Alwin's DPD depot co-workers. Sat in a white Mercedes and a black Audi, the men lay in wait for his arrival, and upon seeing the van he was driving into the street, they readied themselves for the next part of their heinous plan, following the van slowly and getting ready to pounce. As Alwin found his desired address, he stopped his van nearby and his colleague jumped out of the van to deliver the package. As he did, 7 of the 8 men in the awaiting vehicles jumped out of their respective cars, each of them concealing their face with masks and carrying a weapon. Running towards the van, they were upon him in a flash, and even though he had realised what was happening and tried to run, the gang caught up with him in seconds and began brutally beating and abusing him, hitting him multiple times across his body with all manner of the weapons used, with a golf club that one of the men were using to beat him snapping off with the force of the blows being rained down upon Mr. Singh. The intention to kill him was evident and was made even more apparent when one of the men wielding an axe delivered 3 fatal blows to the skull of our man, chopping into his skull and penetrating his brain as they did. As the beating continued, the men were relentless in their attack, with one of the men pulling out a knife and stabbing our man in the back so hard that the knife cut through one of his ribs. Upon feeling that they had now doled out enough pain, the terrible tribe then jumped back into their cars and sped off from the scene, leaving Mr. Singh sprawled across the pavement and bleeding out from his injuries. Once emergency services were on scene, it was obvious that the purpose of the attack had been to murder Mr. Singh, and that he would not have any chance of surviving the attack, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. Once away from the scene, the gang dumped the white Mercedes on Kynaston Road in Shrewsbury and discarded their weapons in Hubert Way nearby, with Mahakdeep Singh and Sahejpal Singh calling a taxi to Shrewsbury railway station and then taking a train to Wolverhampton before fleeing abroad several days later. The Audi, however, was followed by police as it headed towards Tipton in the West Midlands, where the men were filmed dumping the axe wrapped in a grey hoodie in a bin. The car was then stopped and Arshdeep Singh, Jagdeep Singh, Shivdeep Singh and Manjot Singh were all arrested on suspicion of murder, and after denying the charge were found guilty after a 6-week trial at Stafford Crown Court in 2024. The 4 murderers were all sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 28 years on the 12th of April 2024, with police then concentrating on the whereabouts of the others concerned in the gangland-style murder. And their efforts would be rewarded after an extensive police operation working with European police forces. Mahakdeep Singh and Sahejpal Singh were arrested in Austria on the 20th of May 2024 in Honsal. And on Monday 31st of March 2025, the pair were found guilty of the murder of Arman Singh, and on the 11th of April 2025 was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 28 years, the same sentence that the other 4 members of the gang had received last year. Police commented that although the question was asked multiple times, the gang is still to declare the motive for the attack. Our 14th callous killer on the list today is a woman whose evil actions are so despicable, it's hard to even cover this case. At some point on the 14th of April 2024, Shilran Sharagwati, a 30-year-old nurse residing in Juniper Square, Hemel Hempstead, committed an evil and unforgivable act, placing a plastic bag over her 2-year-old daughter Rosalind's head and suffocating her to death. At approximately 4:40 p.m. that day, Sharagwati contacted emergency services stating she may have killed her daughter, and emergency services were immediately dispatched. Despite a gargantuan effort by paramedics, Rosalind was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital, with police immediately taking Ms. Sharagwati into custody for questioning, where she declared that she had no recollection of the murder and was claiming diminished responsibility. She was then charged with the murder of her daughter. During the trial at Luton Crown Court, the jury heard that Ms. Sharagwati pleaded guilty to manslaughter citing diminished responsibility due to mental illness, claiming she had no recollection of the event. However, upon conducting psychiatric evaluations on her, assessors found that although she suffered from mild to moderate depression, this would not impair her ability to make rational decisions or understand right from wrong, and pursued an alternate charge of murder. And on Thursday the 10th of April 2025, the jury found her guilty of the murder of her daughter Rosalind, concluding that her actions were deliberate and motivated by anger towards her former partner, a factor described by the judge as spousal revenge, after he had recently won a custody battle over the custody of their child. On April 23rd, 2025, Sharagwati was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years, with the presiding judge emphasising the breach of trust and the vulnerability of the victim, stating that the crime was a shocking abuse of parental responsibility. In a heartfelt victim impact statement, Rosalind's father, Washington, described his daughter as joyful, loving, and the kind of child every parent dreams of. He expressed profound grief over the loss, stating that the pain of losing Rosalind is something he carries every day, alongside the joy of having known and loved her. At this point in the video, I want to offer my deepest condolences to all of the victims, friends and families who have lost their loved ones in such harrowing circumstances. May all of the victims mentioned in this video rest in peace. And on that note, if you took something from today's video, then you might like to watch this next video where I discuss the tale of an unusual love triangle which ends in the brutal death of an innocent victim at the hands of a very unlikely murderer. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one, when it will once again be time for more true